2, 1. Hey gang, and welcome back to Alien Protocols. We have a really very special guest today. I'm a huge fan of this gentleman. He is one of the very few with a doctorate in parapsychology. He's a clinical psychologist, the author of The Roots of Consciousness and The PK Man. And of course, he is the host of New Thinking Aloud. Plus, he is a level 12 karaoke master. Please welcome Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove. Dr. Mishlove, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure to be with you.
You are one of the very few people who have such a knowledge of Ted Owens, who is someone I'm really fascinated by. The PK Man, you wrote this incredible book, which should be a movie because it's really incredible content. And he really deals with a macro PK effects. And how did you first meet Ted Owens?
Well, I met him in London at the conference that was being organized by a group called the Parascience Foundation. And, he had been invited to speak at that conference because of an earlier event that I had some knowledge of in California. My friends Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, who ran the parapsychology research program at SRI International, it's where they launched the remote viewing work and had funding from the CIA. And they had also achieved quite a bit of publicity because they had tested Uri Geller, the Israeli psychic who was known for metal bending. And they got a letter from this fellow who basically said, why are you wasting your time with Uri Geller? I am the world's greatest psychic, and I'm going to prove it to you because you're experiencing a drought there in Northern California, and I'm going to use my psychokinetic powers to end the drought. In fact, you'll know that I did it because in a few days there'll be rain and snow and sleet and hail, and my signature elements, there'll be power blackouts and UFO sightings, and your local newspaper will publish a story saying that the drought is over. And all of that happened in about 3 days.
Wow.
And so Puthoff and Targ were very excited when but they didn't want to continue any research with him because he was obviously something of a person prone to publicity and drama, and they're getting funding from the CIA, and he was just too much of a loose cannon for them. So they asked me if I would sort of take the file that they had on him, which was already 6 inches thick.
Wow.
Full of all kinds of letters and documents of demonstrations. And I, was a graduate student, young, naive, and promising. And I took the file. And then the news of what had happened in California got out. And so the people in London were experiencing a drought at that time. So when I arrived in London, the drought was pretty bad.
Mm.
My friends where I was staying said, all you have to do to get your picture on the front page of the London Times is walk down Piccadilly Circus holding an umbrella. People will think you're crazy and they'll take your picture and put it on the front page of the paper. But once Ted Owens arrived in London, it began to rain and torrents of rain, and there were power blackouts. The London subway system got shut down because of a power blackout, and within a few days, the local newspaper published a story saying the drought is over, and it was a very severe drought. There were some of the small towns outside of London only would get water because it was brought in by truck.
Wow. And you're in Albuquerque now, and you guys have a little bit of a drought, and you're getting some rain right now, aren't you? And for the next couple of days.
The last 2 weeks, we've had a lot of rain and hail, yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. Well, he's such a fascinating character because he was really bombastic, apparently, and he was wildly kind of cantankerous, and he was into gambling. But he had over, if I'm remember correctly, over 200 predictions that came true. Is that correct?
Well, I have in my files about 160
Mm.
documents relating to demonstrations that he did. He spent most of his adult life trying to convince scientists that he had this ability. So it's rather well documented because he would send out written notices in advance of things that he said he was going to do, and then newspaper clippings showing that they happened because they were large scale. And I would say of the 160 documents or instances of a demonstration, approximately 100 worked out the way he intended.
Wow.
So he was about 2/3 accurate. And I would say that the odds of being accurate in any single instance would be less than 1 in 100 because these were rare events.
And they had multiple things happening with them. So, yeah, that's really. What did you know? I know that he attributed it to two kind of praying mantis type creatures that were aboard an invisible spaceship that would go around the Earth. I think it was Twitter and Tweeter or something like that.
He called them Tweeter and Twitter because he said they would make a high-pitched squeaky sound.
Wow. Now, you've studied him, you did the book on him. What do you think? Do you attribute it to true macro PK?
Well, I think there are several hypotheses that you could look at. It could be macro PK. That's what he claimed most of the time. And he made a point of saying that it's just as easy to do PK on a large scale system as it is to bend a spoon. So that would be one interpretation. Another interpretation, which he sometimes used, is that he's sending telepathic messages to these hyperdimensional entities on an invisible UFO, and that they were using whatever powers or technology they had, they were causing the effects. A third interpretation would be that he didn't really cause these events, he was just very good at predicting them. So the third interpretation would be that it's precognition. I think a fourth interpretation might be that he just got lucky.
Sure, but it seems like with several of those things together, it would make that luckiness more difficult.
Yes, I think when you consider 160 different demonstrations and roughly a track record of 60 to 70%, the odds that it was just luck, I would say, are astronomically small. But it's very hard to do statistical analysis on these large-scale events. So it's possible that, when I say the odds of something happening are less than 1 in 100, I'm sort of ballparking.
Sure.
But consider this, for example, there's a case where he's in a big office building in Philadelphia, and he's bragging. He's working in the building as a typist in a law office. He's in the hallway bragging. There's a view out over the city of Philadelphia. It's a rainy, overcast day, but there's no lightning. And Owens says to one of the lawyers, "I can make lightning strike." And the lawyer said, "Yeah, let's see you do it. Make lightning strike over there." And he points to an area near the Camden Bridge. Owens points his finger like that and concentrates. Within a minute, a bolt of lightning, the only bolt of lightning in the sky at that time, comes and strikes right in that area.
Amazing. That's one of the most amazing single stories of use of PK I've ever heard. That one, and I've never heard that one before. That's amazing.
Well, there are other examples in the literature, but in any case, I think the odds of that occurring are less than 1 in a million. So, but I don't know, ending a drought where nobody saw any end in sight, and within 3 days, after torrents of rain, the newspaper publishes an article, which he again said there will be an article in the newspaper. So it could be an element of precognition there as well.
Now, he was a cantankerous guy.
Yeah.
Did you ever suffer his wrath? Did he ever get mad at you?
On one occasion, he got mad at me because I had set up an experiment in San Francisco with him, because he was known for producing UFO sightings, and I thought that would be interesting. And he said, okay, I'm going to produce 3 UFO sightings, all within 100 miles of San Francisco in a 90-day period. And I was on the phone with him, and already at that point we had had 2 dramatic sightings.
Wow.
And I had also set up as a control group the idea of looking at San Diego, a city of about the same size on the West Coast, to see if any UFO sightings would be reported within 100 miles of San Diego, and there were none. But at this conversation with Owens, he was bragging because he had produced magnificent sightings, one of the most well-attested sightings in the history of UFO research, as a matter of fact. But I said to him, well, you haven't done everything you said you were going to do.
Oh.
Created 2 sightings, not 3. So calm down. And he got angry when I said that to him. He slammed the phone down, and I got immediately a feeling in my throat that you get when you know you're about to get a really bad sore throat.
Oh, yeah.
Scratchy feeling in this, where when that happens to me, I typically feel I know it's going to get worse because this is how it starts. And that went on. I figured, okay, I'm going to be sick. And then 45 minutes later, he called me up and he said, Jeffrey, I'm so sorry. I will never do that to you again.
Wow.
And without ever specifying what he had done. But in any case, the sore throat lifted immediately.
Wow. Wow. That's impactful. Well, I guess I'm sure after that you were a little bit more hesitant to be too stern with him.
Well, the truth is, you never know who you're interacting with when you talk to another human being, what kind of paranormal abilities they may have. And I think the lesson is there's never any reason to treat another human being rudely.
What a wonderful thing to pull out of that, because that's a reality. You don't know who anybody is, and more importantly than anyone having the abilities to retaliate like a Ted Owens, but it's just the right thing to do to treat people decently. And what a wonderful way to kind of experience that.
Yes, I think if a person is a criminal, you don't have to be rude to them.
No, yeah, and that's just such an interesting case, and there's so many different repercussions of it. I mean, if mass macro PK is real, let's just say it is, and assume that it is. I believe it is. What are the repercussions of that?
The repercussions are very serious, and in Ted Owens' case, there were many instances of occasions when people ridiculed him. And, you could say he was asking for it. He, for example, on one occasion, walked into the offices of the San Francisco Chronicle, major metropolitan newspaper, and he said, I am the great PK man, and there was another drought that year. He said, I'm going to end the drought. Well, the guards in the lobby threw him out. He said, I guess I'm going to have to teach you people a lesson. He said, instead of ending the drought, I'm going to cause forest fires all over the state of California. And I mentioned to you, lightning was one of his signature effects. And within a couple of weeks, 300,000 acres burned down in California as a result of thousands of forest fires started by lightning.
Wow. There's an ethical aspect to all psychic abilities, and to PK. And even if you don't have these abilities, I had a shattered shoulder, shattered proximal humerus, and I went to go see a doctor, and he was so mean and he was heartless to me. I didn't have health insurance at the time. And I could see from the x-ray it was shattered, and he was so mean and heartless to me. And it was one of the few times in my life I literally cursed him in my brain.
Huh.
And his name was Dr. Dean Lorich, and he ended up stabbing himself in the heart.
Oh my.
And even and you could look it up in the newspaper and stuff. And I told him, I said, you are heartless. You are heartless. And the fact that he ended up stabbing himself in the heart affected me, because whether I obviously don't, believe and pray that I didn't do what I, was that curse, you know what I mean? But you never know how the universe works and does things. My shoulder, despite I did get the surgery on it, and even that doctor said I would never get 100% recovery, but I did. And I think so much of that was part of my tenacity and stuff. So you should never doubt the power of your own mind. But even if you don't have the power, you could still have a coincidence and you could still feel very guilty about it. Have you ever had, please?
I've tried to avoid doing any kind of large-scale psychokinesis. I took Ted Owen's training, and when he asked me, what do you want to do with this ability? I said, I'm going to, teach you how to do this, and more than teach you, I'm going to use my psychokinesis to transfer that ability to you.
Wow.
And I thought about it, and I said, I don't want to do what you do. I'm not interested in controlling the weather or power blackouts or UFO sightings. I would like to use the ability to manifest a communication to the mainstream public about the realities of the esoteric and psychic worlds. And within a few months of taking the training, I had set up the original Thinking Aloud TV series, which was quickly picked up and went out over the satellite all over North America for 15 years.
Amazing. And now new Thinking Aloud, you actualize that. How many years has both been together?
Well, the original Thinking Aloud series was on public television from 1986 to 2002. Then there was a gap of 13 years, and in 2015, I started the new Thinking Aloud channel on YouTube.
Wow, so you trained in Ted Owen stuff. You were also there at SRI early, and in fact, you have a hallmark case. Your case of you project your target, and you in that, I guess, the walkway, and your drawings and everything. That was really a startlingly accurate one. And you definitely had a talent, or at least certainly in that time period, you certainly did. I wouldn't.
Remote viewing, sure. Well, I'm under the impression that practically everybody can do remote viewing.
I'm as well too. It just seems to be a latent ability. I guess it's that signal to noise ratio. When you're able to block out the noise and you tap it more into the signal, you can be more successful.
Well, I just released an interesting interview on the New Thinking Aloud channel with Lynn Buchanan, who is part of the Stargate program, and he trains remote viewing. And I finally got it, his philosophy. It took me a long time, but it's basically that your subconscious mind is already psychic. It has access to all information in time and space. The key is to transfer that information from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind. And so all of his training is about that. It's about how you can take information that's not conscious and make it conscious. It's not really about being psychic, because he assumes everybody already is.
Yeah, I'm of that same belief too. It really seems to be a place that you tap into below your consciousness, that place where the gestalts come from, that intuition, all of that stuff. There is a theory, and this is completely speculative, and I guess it may be fanciful, I'm not sure, but amongst a lot of other gifted people, I hear the same kind of story. I got it from my mom. And there's this notion that evolutionarily, this intuitive skill to tap into it might have been a female thing where the men are out hunting. Someone had to protect the children, and they didn't have weapons. They were armed with more intuition, perhaps. Now, I don't know how the genetics of that would break down over generations and blah, 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 but it certainly feels like a very comfortable thought, at least.
I think there is a genetic component, but I think my experience is it could be both passed through the males or the females. I had, for example, I got started in this field in 1972 after I had a very powerful dream about my great Uncle Harry. And I wrote home and said, "How's Uncle Harry? I just had a dream about him." My mother called me immediately and said, "How did you know Uncle Harry just died?"
Wow.
And but what I've learned subsequently is that many of my cousins on Uncle Harry's branch of the family also had similar experiences and continue to do so.
Wow.
So I think, Uncle Harry had a gene for psychic functioning that got passed down in the family.
It sounds that way. It sounds that way. You're also involved in something really fascinating. Having been examining this stuff for a long time, you're involved in something that's a very nuts and bolts kind of issue, and that's using gifts for financial gain through stocks and other methods like that. Is that correct?
Yes, I actually have a website called forecastingsystems.com in which I have published what I call compilations of research, conventional research, not paranormal research on forecasting the stock market. I'm very interested in the use of artificial intelligence, neural networks, technical analysis, all of the tools that financial analysts use for financial prediction. And included in that is the use of remote viewing. There's a protocol called associative remote viewing, which is used for stock market forecasting. And there are quite a number of people who have been successful with it.
Wow. Well, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. I asked for 30 minutes and you were so gracious to give that to us. And there's so much we'd love to talk with you about. And I hope you consider in the future accepting another interview with us. And there's so much more to get into in terms of this topic. And I think it's a really important topic. All these different fields are approaching the consciousness and subconsciousness issues from all sorts of different directions. And it seems to be a real nexus, an important feature of the future, and understanding it deeper and more fully, I think, is going to be a real hallmark of what's going to happen in the future.
Well, I'm very glad that you are a viewer of the New Thinking Aloud channel. I know you make comments periodically, and so I'd like to encourage your viewers to check it out if they haven't done that already.
They should. I mean, it is the most thorough. It's the most authoritative. You bring in all the top, best people. You ask the probing questions that we want to hear, and you do it with a great spirit, and you always give us some pauses to think. And thank you for helping us think and giving us.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mishlove.
You're welcome.